Hi, this is Mark Rubin here, and today I have a privilege to interview Anna Litovkina. She is living here in Budapest, and she's a professor, she's a coach, and she's a book writer. And I have attended her seminars in the beginning of this year, sometime in January, I believe. Is that right?
I
Sometime
attended actually four of my workshops. Four.
four,
You
four of
were
her workshops.
you were very active. Yes.
Thank you. Yes,
Success
so I have a
Practices Budapest. Yes.
Success, yeah. She is also holding a meetup here in Budapest, which is called Success Strategies Budapest, where she helps people to set goals, achieve their goals, try to guide them on the path of personal development, and so on. So I was very privileged to be there on those workshops. I learned a lot. And I think that today's conversation that we will have with Anna will probably assist you in answering some of your questions and probably help you in your own life. And eventually, I would strongly suggest that you take one of her classes or master classes that she holds here in Budapest or in Russia. So please go there, attend them. I am sure you will learn a ton.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
let's jump into it, Anna.
Yes. So actually today I would like to tell you, and I would like to tell our audience about the topic of my next workshop. Actually, it's going to be only 2 hour workshop, or you can call it a masterclass, and it's on toxic relationships. So toxic relationships.
Right.
It will be in the same place where we normally have our workshops, D19 or D18 coffee shop, and it will be on the 28th of October at 6:45 in the evening. And I'm ready to answer any of your questions considering the topic of uh, toxic relationships.
Yeah, I was wondering, how did you come up with the idea of having this masterclass and why have you chosen this topic for it?
Yes, actually, maybe for you it's very strange because my first workshop in January was on goal setting. Afterwards, the next one was on habits. Afterwards, I had a workshop on successful strategies or on procrastination and motivation. So, why toxical or why toxic relationships? A few months ago, I was in Russia. I attended 20-day workshops there, not too far from Moscow, and it was very interesting. We had a number of exercises about our energy level, and our coach Vladimir Vinogradov pointed out that people waste a lot of their energy on relationships with toxic people. And actually, we were working in groups of 3, 4, 5 people, and it was really amazing to see that almost everyone had some toxic people in their surroundings. Some toxic people, for example, might be their husbands, their wives, their colleagues, or their parents, or their bosses.
Okay, so, but then what actually makes a toxic person? What are how can you identify those people, or how can you deal, or just give a definition for
Okay.
us. What does it mean to be a toxic person?
It's a very difficult question.
Maybe I'm one of them.
Yes, maybe because actually once in a while I ask myself, maybe I'm a toxical person. Actually, you can be a toxical person for someone. It depends on another person because relationships always depend on another person as well. So it's not only that, for example, someone is absolutely positive, but maybe this kind of positiveness might be bad for someone else. So uh, if I talk about toxic people, let me tell you what might be the red flags when you can think that I am in a toxic relationship. Actually, there are many of such flags. For example, this person might very frequently be angry. Yeah, so you can say that there might be the so-called chronic anger in this person. Also, for example, these people might always produce the so-called chronic sarcasm. And I'm not talking about humor, about the nice, affiliative kind of humor, but always sarcasm, which is just in order to put down another person. You know that one of the fields of my research is humor. So but if someone is always sarcastic, if someone puts down people, this might be indication that another person is a toxic person. For example, some people might always want to control you. So in English language, actually, there is an expression, the so-called control freak. So the person who is control freak. What else here you might actually experience if you are next to a person who is a toxic person. These people might be the so-called the victims. You know, you meet someone and someone always complains a lot. So, oh, I've lost my money, or oh, I'm sick, or whatever happens. So the person is always, for example, complainer. Some people might be always gossiping about another person. Some people might be envious. So what is very common, I could give you at least 20 different types of toxic people, and I could give you more than 30 things which are actually happen when you communicate with toxic people. But what is very important to know is that when you are with toxic people, uh, you feel that the level of your energy gets down. You very frequently feel some guilt. Uh, Very frequently, you feel that they are manipulating you. And very frequently, and a lot of my clients actually, they say that very frequently, they just have to explain, always to explain, and they always need to apologize. So these are just some of the signs of toxic relationships and toxic people. Uh, Sometimes actually the word emotional vampire might be used. Uh, you know, uh, sometimes maybe the word energetic vampire is used. About 5 years ago, I bought a book about energy vampires or emotional vampires. I have it at home. I bought it in Russia, but this book was written by an American author. And I've read this book and I was just shocked. Oh my God, this is also an emotional vampire. This is also an emotional vampire. And I started thinking about myself. And I asked one of my best friends, I asked him, what do you think about me? So, uh, am I an emotional vampire? And we were just starting laughing. He asked me, he told me, if you ask this question, most probably you are not. Um, so I just want to ask you in this regard, have you ever been surrounded by some people with whom you just feel you do not feel really fine, and you feel that something strange happens? You feel that before you uh, have interaction with this person or afterwards, and meanwhile you just are not okay.
Oh boy, I run like wildfire from those people.
Okay, so in this case, you can understand me. You can understand me.
Yeah, no, but this toxic, just the word toxic. It's basically you say that you put it in a negative context. So it's the negative description of the people who have those characteristics. But what is the opposite to the toxic? So how would you describe those people? The
Yes,
non-toxic?
yes, actually, you have given a very good word here, negative. Yes, very frequently what we can say that toxic people are negative people. And actually, a very big problem sometimes for them is that many of them don't really realize that they're negative. So, because they think that this is the world. For example, they think that this is the world, this is a terrible world, How can someone live in such a world? And look, both of us, we have been living in Hungary for quite a lot of time. And we know that very frequently Hungarians, and not just Hungarians, but I have lived in the US for a long time, and I was born in Russia. So we know that certain people might always start complaining. They might say, how can you be happy if, for example, there is an economic crisis? Or how can you be happy if you have a boss like this? Or if you have a wife like this? Or if you have a husband like this? Or if you have parents like this? So these are negative people because they look at the negative side. But I would say that something which is opposite is the person who is positive person. And I'm not talking about people who just say whatever happens, I'm always positive. So, but the person who look at the bright side of the world are the people who actually treat the world, and even if there are any kind of difficulties in their life, they treat this kind of difficulties not as problems. I would say they're not problem oriented, but they're goal oriented. For example, something happens, and immediately they might start thinking, okay, what can this situation show to me? What should I do? For example, you are fired from your workplace. Actually, I remember it was about 10 years ago when I was fired. And okay, for a couple of seconds, I was absolutely disappointed. I even cried for a couple of minutes. And afterwards, my only thought was, or my first thought was, what can I do in this situation? So immediately I updated, for example, my CV. In 3 days' time, I sent my CV to maybe 80 different places in Hungary, and in 2 weeks' time, I had 2 jobs.
No, that's
was
fast.
actually because, but look, but a lot of people, because according to research, according to psychologists, so if you are fired, this is considered to be one of the biggest stress in people's life. So a lot of people become really depressed, and they might just lie in their beds, and they might just cry, and they might say that, oh, how terrible the world is. But if you do like this, will you change it? No. And you start behaving. So I would say that the person who is a positive person, the person who actually if anything happens, feels responsible for this as well, and feels constructive. Okay, something happens, now let me do something, and you change your life. So this is, in my opinion, the way how people who are not toxic people, they react to different difficult situations.
Well, I would, when I hear the word toxic, as a sculptor, and our fine artist, I work with certain materials that you just look at the label and it says toxic, can burn skin, eyes, wear protective wear when you work with them. So for me, toxic also relates to something that affects your health. So do you think a relationship or dealing with toxic people can actually affect our physical, not just emotional health, but our physical health as well?
Absolutely, because actually our emotional state influences our physical state. And for example, according to research, the best psychotherapist in the world, or psychologist in the world who deals with relationships, is John Gottman. Or in US, there is an institute which is called Gottman Institute, and they deal with relationships. And they have conducted a number of research. And for example, if in couples, so there is someone who shows despise, who shows, for example, criticism or something very negative things, it means that, for example, his partner, his wife, or, for example, her husband will leave much less. So just like about 4 year age difference. So if you live in a happy relationship or not unhappy relationship, an unhappy relationship might frequently be connected to people who are toxic. Secondly, for example, if you communicate to toxic people, it is a very big stress. And we know that stress might be a positive, negative stress, but now I'm talking about negative stress. And if you communicate with the negative, with the toxic person, there are a lot of very negative hormones in your blood, and actually someone's lifespan will be much shorter. For example, a lot of people cannot sleep well after communicating to toxic people. So there are okay, stress. For example, we can talk about different types of cancer. We can talk about heart attack and a number of other diseases which one can feel. I myself, I know it because 2 years ago I broke up with my last boyfriend, and actually our relationship, or at least I treated our relationship as very toxic. And I know that sometimes, for example, even before me meeting him, I had some problems in my stomach, really. So, and I never have problems. I mean, I'm a really very healthy person. You know that I do a lot of sports and I pay attention to my emotional well-being. And for example, with him, he very frequently could blow in anger immediately. And when he blew in anger, and it was not connected to me at all. For example, maybe something happened to someone else. Maybe the government decided about something. So anything else. But for example, the anger was there, and afterwards it was very hard for me. Sometimes, for example, I had insomnia. Sometimes I couldn't sleep. So sometimes I had the so-called cold sore. And these things are extremely harmful, extremely harmful. So one of the reasons actually why I decided to break up with him was that so I spoke to him about these issues, and you know that I was studying psychology those years as well, and I just saw that the dynamics didn't change. So nothing changed. And he said that if you love me this way. I'm not going to change. And actually, this is very typical for many toxic people, for many toxic relationships, that these people do not want to change. And they say that, for example, I feel angry about themselves because you have provoked me. But no, because someone might feel angry, but someone might behave out of anger. So it's very different. For example, I myself, okay, I very rarely feel angry, but if I feel angry, I don't yell at someone. So I might say that, look, now I feel angry, and I might explain it. And actually, because everyone has his or her own rights to feel any kind of emotions, but it depends on how you behave. And if you're not a toxic person, you try to explain it, but you behave it in the way that you honor another person's feelings, another person's emotions. And actually, what else is very typical for toxic people is stepping on your boundaries. Stepping on your boundaries. It's very frequently they cannot accept no. So they always want to say yes. And actually, very frequent for toxic people is that they like manipulating. They like manipulating you. And there are a number of very good books on toxic relationships. About 10 years ago, I read a wonderful book. The title of it, Toxic Parents. It has been translated into many languages. In Hungarian, the title is Mérgező szülők. So it has been translated into maybe 30 languages. An American psychologist, Susan, I don't remember her last name, Susan something, has written this, and because it's really it's very strange, and for many people it's really miserable that some people, some some children have toxic parents.
Yeah.
So
Can you tell me, please, if I was just brainstorming right now, thinking about this definition of toxic, and as I mentioned, those materials I work with sometimes, or if we take, for example, drug abuse, like some of the substances those people are using are toxic. Could this particular toxic relationship, could this be addictive, either to the person who is toxic or to the other person who is affected by that relationship? Can this be addictive?
actually, very frequently, yes. Very frequently, yes. And in fact, if we talk about toxic people, very frequently, they do not realize that their behavior is toxic. Of course, they realize very frequently that they are aggressive, for example, that they might use this kind of emotional manipulation. In fact, toxic people might also be called abusive people. But they use the so-called emotional abuse. Emotional abuse. There are quite a number of books on emotional abuse as well. And yes, it might be actually addictive. Very frequently it is. For example, in case if someone's parents were toxical, very frequently, for example, the child of toxic people might feel somehow safe, which is funny to hear, safe in toxic relationship, but maybe it reminds of someone's childhood. Do you see what I mean? Because very frequently we look for some people who somehow resemble our parents, and very frequently, for example, women look for some people who, for some men, for example, for their partners, who resemble somehow their fathers, and men look for women who resemble somehow their mothers. And if, for example, someone's wife or someone's partner resembles, it might be the so-called addictive. And very frequently, actually, it's very hard to stop this kind of relationship, because of course, if we think about relationships, all relationships so are needed for for us. So we actually invest our energy and our time in this as well. So if someone says that just like it's only him or it's only her, it's not true, because you always put your own impact in this relationship, and this is very important to realize. And it's very important actually for if someone is in toxic relationship, it's very important to learn how to say no. It's very important, for example, to keep your emotional balance. I'm not talking now that you should break up with anyone who is toxic. Of course, it's much better if you get rid of such people, but what to do if, for example, someone's father or someone's mother is a toxic person? So, and if you love such person,
So what do you think? Is this something that people are born with, or is it something that is learned over time?
I would say that it's learned. I would say that it's learned, and it depends on how. Of course, a lot of things I learned are in our childhood. So it depends on what kind of love someone's got from his or her parents. Because a lot of parents are not mature actually when they have their children. So a lot of people, a lot of parents are toxic. So if they're toxic, they show this kind of toxicity to their children. And their children see it. Because look, if we think about manipulation, and for me, it's a very interesting topic, manipulation, especially emotional manipulation. So very frequently, manipulation is a kind of strategy. And a lot of toxic people are manipulators. And actually, children, even if you are a very small child, less than 1 year old, children can manipulate. You know, you have your own child. So Children know with whom they can behave this way or that way, with whom they can actually start yelling, with whom they can't. And look, if you use the same strategy again and again, if you use this strategy and your parents allow you to use it when you're a small child, afterwards you use it with your friends, and afterwards you just see that this strategy works. Because any strategy you use is good for something. And of course, actually, toxic people, because some toxic people do not understand, oh my God, there are no friends in my surroundings, so all people are terrible, no one loves me. Look, a lot of people might say this. In this case, just look at yourself. Why don't you have friends around you?
Okay, so basically you have described the cause of the toxic relationship. So it's either something that we learn while we're growing up, or something, maybe the taste of power that we feel when we get something done for us. Probably that's causing that sense of fulfillment, that sense of joy for them to, when they're served and when they achieve their desires and goals, in one sense. Is that right?
Uh, I would say that yes, very frequently, because because a lot of toxic people are control freaks, and they would like to feel their power. Uh, for me, it's very strange because I myself am a very positive person, and for me, it's very strange that someone would like uh, to have this his or her power this way, because I think it's extremely unconstructive. I think it's very harmful. It's very harmful for toxic people as well. Very frequently, toxic people themselves, they are very sick, so they have a lot of problems in with their mental health. So yes, I would answer your question. Yes.
I just, one other thing came to my mind, that I would say that there are people who are doing this unconsciously, so they're not aware of the things that they're doing. But those who are using it consciously definitely are the ones we should stay away from.
Uh, Actually, I have just got a degree of psychologist and coach from the University of Practical Psychology, or Университет практической психологии. It's in Moscow, in Russia. And there are one of the best practical psychologists in the world, Nikolai Ivanovich Kozlov, says, if you have a chance not to surround yourself with toxic people, it's better if you surround yourself with positive people. Because actually, what happens if positive energy and if negative energy meet on short-term run, negative energy actually, unfortunately, wins. So imagine you get into the room and you see 100 very happy people, and you see one face which is very angry. The vast majority of people would pay attention to their angry face. And actually, and this is what happens, that if a single angry person enters the room, and if there are 10 people who are very happy, and he yells at them, you need to be Dalai Lama, or you need to be a person who have been meditating, because with Dalai Lama and with many people, I meditate, so I do a lot of practice which is mindfulness. I do yoga. So with Dalai Lama or with some people who meditate a lot, any toxic people will lose. Okay, but with the vast majority of people, toxic people might win. In short-term run, because later on you just see that whenever I meet him or her, it happens the same. I do not feel well. I feel that I'm put down. I feel guilty. I feel that I need to explain. I feel that I have to ask sorry when I do not really need to say I feel sorry. For example, someone steps on my boundaries all the time, and after a while, this is actually why toxic people are very frequently without good friends, without good colleagues, without partners.
So it's probably can be also a cause for anxiety for many of people. So what do you think? Can this be a source of anxiety in
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, uh, now, now, luckily, in my surroundings, there are no toxic people. So for about 2 years, there haven't been toxic people in my surroundings. Of course, it doesn't mean that they will not come anyone, but I really pay attention uh, to people whom I allow to get closer to me because of this anxiety. Because I know what it means. So I have had a couple of toxic people in my surroundings before, and I know what it means. And now, really, I trust my intuition. And of course, actually, I don't say that as soon as you say that someone is negative, because someone might be negative. Imagine, for example, someone might be very positive, but something happens in someone's life. So, for example, someone's parents die, someone's spouse dies, and so on. So I'm not talking about this kind of negativity because it's absolutely
it's more of a constant, like continuous flow in their life. It's
yes,
dominant emotional state that they live in.
yes,
So,
yes.
but what do you think? Can these people actually change? Because we spoke about that this is a learned thing. Can this be unlearned, or what can they do to actually change? Or you as a coach, what could you? How would you deal with a person like that? How would you help them?
Actually, I would say that very few toxic people would like to go to a psychologist. Very few toxic people would like to change because the reason why they're toxic, very few manipulators would like to do it. Uh, because simply this is their strategy, this is how they live their life, and they profit a lot. They profit a lot because what who frequently comes to me. So frequently, for example, now I have a couple of clients who come to me because their partners are toxic or their parents are toxic. Sometimes maybe their children might be toxic, and here, and you know that it's impossible to change another person. So
Yeah,
it's impossible because
unless they want to.
yeah. So another person wants to change, and what a psychologist or what a coach can help. So can help a person who comes to you. For example, you can help to develop certain kind of strategies how to deal with this, and of course at first how this relationship can be changed. But very frequently, actually, it's impossible to change, especially there is a kind of toxic person who is might be called gaslighter. So nowadays in US, this is a very popular term. Gaslighting is a particular type of manipulation. Most frequently, men are gaslighters, not women, but men. But this is a very long. It would be very long discussion. So maybe one day we will talk to
Sure.
you about gaslighting. Very, very interesting.
I need to do some research on that.
Yes. So I would say that if a person who is a toxic person gets to you, because actually when I decided that I'm going to break up with my last boyfriend, he told me he doesn't want to change. He told me that uh, for him everything is perfect the way how it is, but for me it was not perfect. He didn't want to go to a psychologist and to coach, and that was the moment when I just saw that, oh, so some people come to me because they would like to change. I know that it's possible. So, and look, for example, if the same situation happens to someone again and again, maybe by the end of someone's life, maybe the person would like to change. But very frequently, what toxic people do are they are permanent accusers. They will say it's not them. They will say that someone else was wrong. If you do not think that you are also responsible for something, so you cannot change, because change starts when you say to yourself, "Okay, I have fucked it up. So I have uh, done this. So what can I learn from this situation?" So this is the moment actually when people decide to go to a coach. This is the moment when people decide that they're going to go to a new workshop to acquire some new skills. But for this, really, your how do they say, your glass or your cup really has to be entirely full of something that you say that
Don't say what it's full with.
yes. Uh, and you just say that, okay, now I would like to change because I see that I do not have a partner, I do not have a good colleague of mine, no one wants to talk to me. So what's wrong with this world? Because toxic people very frequently say that something is wrong with the world, but you say that, and I don't say that you should say what's wrong with me, because if you put up categories like right and wrong, it is not too good. But you just say that this is the situation, this is where I am now, where would I like to be? And you go to a coach and you decide that, okay, I would like to change, and you can develop quite a number of things. There are a lot of books on this. There are a lot of, actually, even in YouTube, if you type toxic relationships or toxic people, you will find quite a lot of ideas, a lot of videos on this topic.
Just when you mentioned that people realize it, or some people may realize it in the end of their life, it just reminded me of Charles Dickens' book, The Christmas Carol, where this Scrooge was actually at a certain point he realized that he cannot continue living like that anymore. So he changes after those three ghosts appear in his room. But anyway, it just reminded me of that particular story.
And actually, I just would like to say something which is very different from toxic relationships. You know that in April I went to London to Tony Robbins' workshop or seminar, Unleash the Power Within. And on the third day, there was a technique which was used by him, and it's called Dickens pattern or Dickens technique. And actually, it takes its name
Exactly.
just yes. When you just imagine what my life is going to be if I continue doing the same thing as I have been doing now, and you just start feeling frightened. And I mean, I was there together with 12,000 people or more there when just people were just yelling at this moment when they were imagining this.
Yeah, so that's one of the techniques you can actually help with, help these people to realize what they've been doing so far is really wrong. So that's one of the ways to guide them, induce that type of fear or the fear of future, of where they could end up if they continue living like that. But tell me, please, is when it comes to loving relationships, can there be a toxic love? Like, can a true love be toxic in a relationship? Can that happen? And what to do if it?
I mean, I do not believe in toxic love. So a lot of people talk about love. Actually, about 20 years ago, I published an article in US. It was about proverbs about romantic love. And yes, in people's heads, there is an idea about unreturned love. There is an idea about love as craziness, control of your peace, or that it's like volcano and so on. It might happen sometimes, but if it always happens, so it might be a kind of infatuation. And of course, in all relationships, there is some kind of negativity. All relationships. You can't imagine that everyone is always positive. For example, John Gottman, in his books and in his videos, talks about the ratio, which is 5-to-1 ratio. So what he says that if couples, especially they talk about some conflicts, because all couples have conflicts, but if you have a conflict with your partner, for each negative statement, you should have at least 5 positive statements. So
that's interesting.
because yes, and actually he talks also about the so-called the masters of relationship. And he talks that masters of relationships, so people who have very happy marriage, so who have been living together for 20, 30, 40, 60 years, so their ratio of negativity and positivity is 1 to 7. So each negative statement or negative interaction, 7 positive ones. So from this point of view, yes, once in a while, of course, you might feel toxic. You might feel that you hate the world. So, but look, what is very important, for example, uh, very important is that you apologize. And the vast majority of toxic
Yeah.
people never apologize. So I remember years ago, for example, my daughter was maybe 10 years old. I was planning to go to US next day. I was extremely busy. I was packing, and she said something to me. So she started to talk in a kind of voice which I didn't like. And normally I don't yell at anyone, but it was the moment when I just raised my voice. Afterwards, I just pay attention to what I've done, and immediately I went to her and I
You
say,
corrected
I
yourself.
feel so sorry, so I shouldn't have done this. And of course, in this case, your child might just show that he or she feels so offended and so on. But I know that it really helps. It really helps. And once in a while, if you do something, you say, I am sorry. But it's not enough if you just apologize, but if you continue this kind of behavior. What is very important that you correct your behavior, you improve this behavior.
Well,
So
that's good. Well, since we were talking about Tony Robbins, I would just add a little bit to that. Is one of his main strategies and one of his main philosophies is the ability to control your state, and
mhm.
that's where this comes to play. When you actually monitor, you are aware of what state you're in, and you learn how to control your state so you don't fall into this negative side, or you don't break out and yell at someone just because someone stepped on your toe. But yeah, learning to control the state is everything, and that actually affects all our decisions, all our emotions, all our actions so hardly, so badly, or in such a good way if we can manage them.
Yes, absolutely. And in London in April, for example, I walked on fire.
Mm.
So I even have a certificate about it, fire walker. And about 12,000 people, not everyone was doing it. Not everyone was ready to do it, but of course I did it. And before we did it, Tony Robbins actually told us a lot of things about controlling your state. So, like if you walk on fire, and maybe it was about 8 meters, you walk on real fire, so on ashes. So you need to do it in the way that you know that you will be able to do it. Otherwise,
You have to be 100% certain that you can
yes,
do
yes.
it.
And I didn't have even like a 1% idea that, oh, maybe I don't manage. So I had this 100% sure, yes, I will be able to do it.
And that's one of the powers of like group interventions, where you see other people do it, and you get the strength and you get the courage to follow their steps, and you, if you're clever enough to understand the strategies that they're using to control their state, if you learn and apply those techniques, you can do it too. And this is one of the ways the coaches are helpful, because they give you a new perspective, they give you a fresh sight of what's possible that you previously thought is impossible. And surrounding yourself with the people, with the positive people who can actually show you what you're meant to be for here on this earth, or what you are capable of doing, that you are more than you are showing right now, is actually one of the most inspiring relationships to be in, either your friends or your relatives or your peer group. Usually it's not the friends and family, but the peer group, if you choose them right, and if they encourage you to do this in a positive way, and if you see the examples like role modeling. Tony Robbins is also talking about role modeling. So you take someone, you have doubts on walking on fire, but you take someone who did it, you talk to them, you study them, what they do, how they breathe, what they think, how they act, and you imitate that, and you apply those strategies, you apply that type of thinking, you apply those practices, and then you realize that you can do it too. So that's one
Absolutely,
of the
absolutely.
powers.
Absolutely, and actually, I have a friend. She's one of my very new friends. We met about 2 years ago. She's 82 years old. She's so positive. It is such a joy to meet her. She lives in Italy. She was born in Hungary. She lives in Italy, and actually, uh, in a few days' time, we are going to meet because she is going to be in Budapest. And for me, it's such a pleasure to always to meet her. And I also have a friend of mine in US. Her name is Ruth Stotter, and we haven't met for 20 years, but sometimes we write letters to each other, and she's so positive. So it is such joy to be next to her, even to get an email letter from her, and so active. So you can be positive.
It is true.
You can be uh, amused by the world. You can be happy. So there are so many people who show it.
It's just a
And
matter of practice.
this is the matter of practice, and actually this is the matter of where we put our energy. You know that what is the difference between a pessimist and an optimist? If we have a glass, so one of them, and we know who will say that it's half full, or another one will say it's half empty. And there are optimistic people, they always look opportunity for something, and pessimistic people, they will find excuses for not doing something. And
So tell me, please, that probably this would be my last question to you. What do you think? Why is it so hard for some people to actually leave toxic relationships? I know relationships, it's always an emotional, well, we get into relationships because of the emotions, and we get out of the relationships because of the emotions. But why is it so hard to get out of, particularly of these toxic relationships?
actually, or you know, for whom it is very hard. It is very hard for people who do not love themselves. For people who, for example, were not really loved by their parents did not show what love means, what care means. They didn't set up high standards for them. And if such a child grows up, this child, at first you take it for granted, and afterwards you are in the relationship when you just feel afraid. You feel afraid that if I'm going to leave this relationship, no one will love me any longer. But actually, you have to see that this is not love. This is not love. This is just like abuse. And there many people actually live their life according to the principle expressed in the proverb, better the devil you know than the devil you do not know. They might say, I will not be able to meet another friend, or I will not be able to marry again if I leave him or if I leave her, so no one else will care about me. But meanwhile, actually, meanwhile, they procrastinate. And do you know, Mark, a few months ago, I had a workshop on procrastination, and I asked the questions about procrastination, who procrastinated what, and procrastinating getting out of toxic relationship. So that was the reason number 2, people procrastinated. And we had very interesting discussion about this. Why? Why? So people have a lot of fears. People are afraid of changes. People are afraid of unknown. And from this point of view, actually, I think it's much better if. So my opinion is, and this is why I've decided to choose one of my professions, the profession of a coach and psychologist. At first, trying to fix something. So at first you try, because you know a lot of people, they don't try to fix anything. So as soon as there is the first difficulty, they get away. But if you don't do it, you try to fix. But if you try, you have made attempts, and you see that another person is not willing to change your dynamics and so on. So it might be extremely harmful, but it's better to leave this relationship because it will not become better. Especially if you are with the so-called emotional abuser, because very frequently at first there is emotional aggression, and afterwards there will be physical aggression. So physical aggression never comes there before emotional aggression takes place. So, and this is why it's very important to consider these things. And maybe something which might be my last comment on their deathbed. So a lot of dying people have been asked, what do they feel sorry most of all in their life? And the vast majority of them say that they feel sorry for not taking chances. So for procrastinating something they could have done. And from this point of view, so I think it's very important. It doesn't really, it doesn't matter how old someone is. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship you have, but always consider like your life. What would you like to come to at the very end of your life, so that you do not feel sorry for your life. You do not feel sorry that you haven't taken chances.
That's great. That's great. Well, for those who watched us and listened to us for this long, thank you very much. And I strongly advise you to attend this workshop that Anna would be giving in October. Please follow her Facebook page and announcements about the workshop. I'm sure it will be very, very educative and very helpful to everyone who will attend. This conversation was very educative to me. And thank you very much, Anna, for this. What would be your final wish or final words for those who listened to us?
First of all, I would like to thank you for preparing this interview with me, and those of you guys who are listening to me now, I would recommend to you try to surround yourself with only positive people. Try to get rid of toxic people as you can do it, or learn a number of techniques actually how you can cope with some unnecessary toxicity in your life. There are quite a number of techniques, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. If you're in Budapest, come to my workshop. It will be at 6:45 in Budapest on the 28th of October. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.